Hello, IK here. Welcome to Why Initial Rendering. Uh, Initial rendering, as all other rendering, as all re-rendering, as all interaction with the user interface, altogether working process of React is working process of JavaScript. Uh, JavaScript at first uh, process is removing uh, part, removing HTML and CSS from JSX. And we have clear JavaScript, and that JavaScript go to engine, JavaScript engine. We call it virtual machine. And virtual machine, there is a stack by stack growing and decreasing, expand, and go up and down, depend about activity, uh, uh, and output of a virtual machine is assembler. Assembler is programmed by assembly language. And assembly language transform that virtual machine language in machine language. And when JavaScript in machine language go to processor. It is like some streaming. We're working on React on the screen by the user interface, all our interaction, all what happened behind scene go to virtual machine, and from virtual machine go to assembler and go to processor. So initial rendering, initial rendering. Initial rendering is, we can compare with JavaScript vanilla when we must declare and initiate variable. If we don't does it, if we didn't do it, we have errors. We have undefined keyword, undefined keyword. When we, after encode, use some variable, what we didn't declare and instantiate, we have undefined and program cannot work. And it is with initial rendering. Initial rendering is for declaring an instantiation. What? Variable. What more? Function also. I can say declare instantiation for function also. And our component, like object, there is a state and there is a function. And it must be declared. We, in our document file, like you see on the screen, we in script create all that statement by statement. We create all in our component. And that component, when we call that component, when we need that component, always have initial rendering. Initial rendering before possibility of interaction. After initial rendering, we can have re-render it because we need use effect, like in a post list. But in add post form, we don't need re-rendering. We have only one initial rendering. And initial rendering concretely ed post form is ideal for understanding. Must initial rendering must give us on the screen ed post form, and all behind it must give us on the screen. When we have on the screen form, when we see form on the screen, it means that initial rendering uh, go to JavaScript engine. Every browser there is a JavaScript engine or a virtual machine, JavaScript virtual machine. It is a program in language, virtual machine language. And initial rendering means processing that component, of course, remove HTML and CSS, and clear JavaScript of our component, go to virtual machine or JavaScript engine. JavaScript virtual machine execute in virtual machine language, execute our component, and we call that process of it is rendering, process rendering in virtual machine. It is process execution, but it is in virtual machine not final execution. Final execution is machine language, but virtual machine is not in machine language. It is virtual machine language, and create stack by stack a solution like execution, and create stack by stack or statement by statement. Some statement can produce more stack in virtual machine. Virtual machine growing and decreasing, increase, decrease, expand, decrease during working, during our interaction with the React application. And from a virtual machine language, go to assembler. Assembler is program created by assembly, language assembly. And assembler and means compiling in final compiling our script to machine language, and when it is in machine language, go in processor, and that path must go initial rendering, and initial rendering, it is our declaration and definition, declaration, variable, definition, function. Of course, here is on title change equal. This arrow function is defining definition of function, and it must be defined before then we can use it. And because of that, we need initial rendering. Of course, title, set title must be initiated. It is declaration and initiation, title state, and function set title. Also content set content. Error, add request status, dispatch, function dispatch, equal use dispatch. All that must happen before using before to see form on the screen. Form on the screen. Uh, okay, that is in and when we know that, we understand this uh, function. We understand uh, a lot of usability of arrow function, because arrow function is good for defining. There is no name, and this object is a name of our function. This object is a name of our function. And like post list, we understand when we know that must be initial, we understand why here is arrow function. Uh, when we when I start using learn React, it was very confused why I need arrow function. Why I don't need directly without arrow function this. If it is directly without arrow function, it would be execute in initial rendering. During initial rendering, it would be called because initial state exists, status is idle, and here is always one, it is always ready, and initial rendering would activate this dispatch. But when it is in arrow function would be defined. Arrow function is defined, and that define must go in process and must be processed, defined. We cannot skip arrow function and execute this. No, we must define arrow function. And it is also confusion was, I was confused. Uh, why, why initial rendering? Don't activate this even in arrow function. Because I think user effect and parameter of user effect, if this is directly parameter of user effect, cannot be activate without calling use effect. Only use effect can activate parameter, but it is not true. Initial rendering will activate parameter. Also, this arrow function activate initial rendering. How? Define arrow function. It is what we have in parameter. If we have directly status and display would be executed. Status equal idle, it is true. Dispatch fetch post true, it would be executed. It means that a user effect don't encapsulate parameter from initial rendering. I think that encapsulate, but not initial. Initial rendering will activate, will call dispatch fetch post if it is direct parameter. Because of that, we need arrow function. Arrow function, of course, we have all others instruction about dependency when use effect would be start. A use effect is a start every time when event component was mounted happened. Event component was mounted, always call use effect. But when we have dependency, dependency said in this situation, status and dispatch, that changes in status will and that said that not every event component was mounted would start use effect, would call use effect, not but must be changes of status. It means that if we have a component was mounted event, it call use effect, it always call use effect, but if not change status, if there is no changes of status, there would be no activation of use effect. Use effect would not be activated. Also with dispatch. Also with dispatch. Without, if it is empty, it means no dependency. And in that situation, we have no dependency, okay. But every component was mounted would call use effect. When we have dependency, not every calling of component was mounted would be activate use effect. Must be changes of status or changes in dispatch. Okay, but this video and this is about initial rendering, and initial rendering is declaring and instantiation. And here is defined function. But I like said that it is declaring and instantiation of function. Declaring, and one word is defining, define action, a define function. It is arrow function. Here it is finished arrow function. Arrow function, parameter nothing, and in curly brackets it is body of arrow function. We have logical door, and the door status equal idle, it is true, and right side dispatch fetch post, it is true. And it is encapsulating arrow function. It is encapsulating arrow function. So in initial rendering, initial rendering execute starting point. Starting of every component, there is an initial rendering. Starting point. And here it is. What is starting point of post? It is array. Use a selector, it's hook, and state, post. It is would be initial rendering because in reducer, in store, there is initial rendering, and post would be empty, array empty. Status would be idle, and error would be null. It is initial state. Before initial rendering of this component, it is happened in index. Here it is, where we have a store, like props here in provider, and store equal store here, this file, and this file call post slice. Post slice is a reducer of state post. Reducer of state post. And that reducer would be installed. Configure store, install reducer post reducer. It means we have initial state. Reducer, every reducer must have initial state. Initial state is post array empty, status idle, and error is null. It is visible in post slice. Here is a post slice. Here is in initial state. Post, it is object. Post is array empty. Status idle, error null. And it happened in index.js. Index.js call component app.js, and starting component app, there is a child add post form and post list, and child start initial rendering one by one, and after that app. Always child start first, but app is called in index.js call app, but it after happening, after instantiate store, after instantiate Redux, initial state, start component app and all other component with initial rendering. It means when post list have initial rendering, waiting for that, initial state is ready there in reducer, and post list this side is 1. Right side always 1, and we start, but we cannot start it because initial rendering. Look at first what C. First what C is arrow function, and must in that first scanning, in that first processing, what we call initial rendering, see what first C arrow function, and declare and instantiate that arrow function. That arrow function don't have name. How would be called? Use effect. We must call use effect to start execution of arrow function. And with thanks to arrow function, not directly this in parameters use effect, we have encapsulation of this encapsulation in arrow function. First arrow function, after that dispatch. After that, this part of conditions. And it is not simple one expression. There is a second parameter of use effect. It is about dependency, and altogether it is inside of arrow function, and arrow function in re-rendering when component was mounted event call use effect. Use effect start execution of arrow function. In second rendering, in re-rendering, happen execution of arrow function. How it is possible? Because arrow function is there, present, exist. Arrow function with initial rendering is created. It go through JavaScript engine, go to, or virtual machine, go to assembler, go to processor in machine language, and finished in memory, read in memory in part of JavaScript thread, and waiting for re-rendering. Re-rendering go immediately after initial rendering because of use effect, because of event component was mounted. And that re-rendering can call arrow function because arrow function exists defined in memory. Exists defined in memory, and re-rendering call it call use effect, and use effect start execution of arrow. With arrow function, it is possible escape immediately calling this if it was directly parameter of use effect. Arrow function disable that possibility. Arrow function. And because of that, we need initial rendering. Initial rendering must go in process and install, we can say, install in memory all what we need. And we need state, we need function, all that must be installed, defined, and after that re-rendering work what want to, or there is no re-rendering like in add post add post add post add post like in add post form. Okay. Here I spoke about it is something like streaming, our interactivity, or I can say this. React application is rendering, re-rendering of component plus interactions. Rendering component plus interaction. That rendering component go in stack by stack in virtual machine, and sometimes growing, sometimes increase in volume of that virtual machine, sometimes decrease in volume. And if we have a lot of callbacks, a lot of function, we can go increasing, and we can go stack overflow. And it can happen in every programming. In JavaScript, we spoke now about JavaScript programming, but any programming with virtual machine. And from virtual machine, uh, code go to assembler. Assembler transform virtual machine language to machine language. It is assembly. Uh, why it is? I spoke only about that, and it is like streaming, like audio and video. What we watch, it is some stream go to from our interaction. Component rendering. Rendering means go in virtual machine, increase, decrease, and from virtual machine go assembler, assembler go to processor, because assembler is transformation, is compiling that virtual machine. All process, it is all processes from script language, what we see now in screen, to machine language. But when you talk with artificial intelligence, they spoke you about compiling what have a C language, C++, and other languages, but and said it is not compiling like C, C++. Okay, it is not compiling that we have compiled file. No, it is compilation when we need. It is a script language. And script language is in script, is not compiled. Our component not compiled. They are in script language. And when we need component, that moment, that component must go in compile process. But that compile process is not directly, it go to virtual machine, we call it interpreter of JavaScript. Go to virtual machine, after that in assembler. Why it is, why we need a virtual machine? Virtual machine, JavaScript, for every processor, every microprocessor and every controller, there is a different assembly. Different assembly. This hardware is different. Assembly is directly connection hardware and software. It is first software in machine language, and machine language is directly with architecture is of controller or processor. And because every series of controller, every series of processor, there is a oven assembler, assembly language. We must JavaScript transcode. We must coding from script from starting script of JavaScript to final assembler. We must create assembler. It is a very, very long process from high language to machine language. And that we escape this, authors, programmers create a virtual machine. It is in some language coding virtual machine. It is like a complete execution of JavaScript program and by some virtual machine language, and that virtual machine can go on any controller, but some part from virtual machine from that unique virtual machine to concretely processor, separate coding assembler. Assembler is program. It is separate coding for concretely processor. And uh, when we spoke about and because of that, for some controller, kind of controller, there is less coding because in every controller, every processor can go virtual machine. Virtual machine is one for all, but virtual machine cannot, don't go in machine language. It is only virtual machine language, and it work in any environment. But what is different that part from virtual machine to machine language for concretely controller. For concretely controller. Uh, and we don't need for every kind of controller, we don't need authors and programmers don't need program complete process from script high level to machine language. No, because they have virtual machine. Virtual machine is execution of our JavaScript on every machine, uh, virtual machine, and JavaScript execute in virtual machine, can complete execute, but it is close the process, what don't touch closed process must have assembler to go to have a machine language for concretely architectured hardware for concretely processor. Okay. I hope that I am clear in explanation. If I'm not, ask question in ask a question in comments, and it is it is very interesting learn JavaScript, learn React, and have one complete image of all that. And I try to be simple, and because of that I have a video, thematic video, very focused thematic video. Because of some focus, there is a lot of for explain. Okay, this is all for this video. Thank you for watching this video.